Hey, thanks for showing up here at 3 p.m. As Adrian mentioned, I'm Stephen Hilt. And this is a talk into diving into open source red teaming tools and how some new methodologies that we could potentially utilize to evaluate and defend and protect against uh, open source red teaming tools as criminals and nation states are increasingly use them. So today we're going to talk about what is red teaming, because I'm not sure everybody in the room knows what tools are being used, and some case studies of criminals and APTs using them, proactive versus reactive approaches to dealing with red teaming tools. Um, who is the red? Something I like to say is who red teams the red team, and also everyone's on the same team. So this isn't a bash for any of the red team, blue team, purple team, white team, orange team, green team. Um, Lavender. I don't know. Who in here is a red teamer? Okay, thank you. Jeez. Uh, Anybody in here solely on defense? All right, cool. Does anybody not know what a red team is? So, a red team is a group, usually either depending on the size of your organization, it's either an internal team or a hired consultant. They simulate adversarial threats and to test organizational defenses. Their job is to challenge all the assumptions, identify vulnerabilities, and expose gaps in security and the decision-making processes as well. Red teams can conduct physical or digital intrusions, often without alerting employees. And that's the big difference on red teaming versus pen testing, is usually a lot of pen tests tend to be more informed. Somebody in the organization knows about it. That's usually on the defense side. Um, though their actions might seem deceptive on the surface, red teams uh, are operating with the full authorization of the organization's leadership, and it's usually entirely legal. Their findings are used to strengthen the organization's overall resilience. The concept of red teaming comes from the US military in the 1960s, where they were designed to evaluate strategies by simulating Soviet threats. Uh, One of the early adopters of formal red teaming came up with that. It was actually the RAND Corporation going against the Pentagon strategies. Today, red teaming isn't just limited to that, but cybersecurity is also involved. They also use red teaming for emergency planning and and other things like that as well. So as I said, here I am. I usually work on the defense. I work for a company that's more on the defense, even though we do have services into red teaming. So what do I have to say about red teaming? Well, I wrote books and I'm mentioned in Red Tribe of Hacker Red Teams. I have a chapter, it's chapter 26 on that. And I'm a co-author of Industrial Control Systems Hacking Exposed. So for a long time, I was more on the offensive side, and I worked more or less as a pen tester for industrial control systems. Kind of came up with some of the blueprints on how that's all working. Um, I've authored offensive tools. You can go find them on various places throughout the internet. Most of them are for targeting control systems. But what I've noticed recently is that there's an uptake in criminals and nation states using open source tools to attack targets around the world. One of the things when you're trying to find uh, red teaming tools, people really love to know that they put this phrase up here on GitHub. I searched for educational purposes. People feel like that's their get out of jail free card. But what you can see here is I searched that, and there is 28,000, over 28,000 results. For what it's worth, when we released this research last year, I did the same search and it was just over 19,000. So in 1 year, we've added 9,000 projects that have for educational purposes inside in the terminology. While some of these have while some of these have intended malicious purposes. Just shows you that, and some are not. You can see on this screen here, um, brings standard libs and other programming languages to JavaScript for educational purposes. Highly likely not a malicious package meant for red teaming or pen testing. So which one of these are, out of these 28,000, how do we even know what to start looking at? How do we triage this? How do we start making detections for this? And how do we go on? So let's look at some of these projects. While some of these projects that cyber criminals and even nation states are utilizing today. While many of the tools that are being published seem to be innocent, like this cat, they can be used by criminals and abused, even with supply chain attacks. And we'll have some case studies on that. This is one reason why we should ensure that our red teams are doing and understanding their jobs and also cleaning up afterwards. And I'll show you some examples of, you should come up with really good plans for everyone to clean up everything you've done. We all know Cobalt Strike. We all know that it got cracked and that all the criminals started using it. Then we wrote a lot of good detections, and it's very harder for them to use it. So like everyone did a really quick catch up. And so that they moved into other tools, and among these were Brute Ratel and Sliver, and those were growing in popularity a year ago, and they've moved on to other things as well. So this presentation is going to provide defenders and SOCs with technical details and tools that you're likely going to encounter as well. One down there on the bottom in the left hand, we'll talk about Demos C2 in a little bit. Actually, we'll talk about it right now. So Demos C2, I wrote this blog because we were tipped off to a nation state actor that may have been using this. Couldn't confirm it, so I can't tell you exactly which one it was. But Demos C2 was being used by a nation state. So we started looking into that, and kind of was already doing this project. So this was something that made me realize we need to do more into this and look harder into it and find this before things like this nation state moved from building their own C2s to using open source ones. To date, there's conversations in the underground about moving to different C2s, talking about C2s and things like that. But attackers are choosing these. They have conversations, and cyber criminals are having conversations on which ones that are better, which ones that they should be using. So other tools that they're mentioning and discussing are Posh C2, PHP Exploit, Merlin. Similar to red teamers, cyber criminals like to use a mix of command line and GUI-based C2 frameworks, depending on their preferences. They also like them to be easy to build and maintain and operate. We did find some, as the screenshot shows, Demo C2 appearing as a recommended alternative to Cobalt Strike in Russian-speaking forums. Does everybody know what business email compromise is? Okay. So it poses a significant problem. I think in the last 10 years, it's been estimated that it would cost $55 billion. BEC scammers utilize stolen accounts from legitimate SMTP services to bypass email filters, enhancing the credibility for their emails to get into the inboxes. In 2022, we found and discovered a new potential BEC campaign that had been running. So we found it in September. It had been running since April, targeting large global companies, spear phishing attacks with fraudulent Microsoft phishing campaign. The attack involved using obfuscated JavaScript code, and then the use of a cybercriminal tool called Bot, and then they were using EvilGenix 2 as well. So here's the blog on that. The attackers leverage Bot and EvilGenix 2 to stage their attacks. The payloads in the email were obfuscated JavaScript. Typical BEC targets campaign include executives and finances departments in companies with substantial annual revenue. Regular employee training and monitoring, again, is pretty much what we've been doing. So going through some of the tools. This is an open source tool called the JavaScript Obfuscator. Has anybody used this before? It's really good. It obfuscates your JavaScript to making it nearly, depending on which options you check, it makes it nearly impossible to deobfuscate. So you have to go through the tools and step through all the ability to understand what's actually happening. So it's really, really hard to deobfuscate. Very popular tool. There is online deobfuscators that actually work a little bit now, but when this first came out, it was a free for all. So again, we're talking 2025 about 2022, and we're just now at a place where we can say they're doing better at deobfuscating this. EvilGenix 2 is a phishing framework. Many of the phishing as a service toolkits are actually using EvilGenix 2 as the back end. Well, it's EvilGenix 3 now, but they're using EvilGenix as the back end. So it's very common. Criminals are using this. It's quite problematic. But don't worry, everybody. They have a disclaimer that even though they know it can be used for nefarious purposes, it's definitely for educational purposes. And shouldn't be used by criminals, because criminals follow nice guidelines like that, right? Like, please don't use my stuff, criminals. I know you can use it. So that doesn't work. So this is just one example. Here, more recently, this is also a obfuscated JavaScript file. So more recently, as in last few years, but we had a blog come out on this 3 weeks ago now. More recently, the North Koreans have made fake job schemes. I think there was a talk on deepfakes in the other track, specifically mentioning North Korean attacks. They make fake jobs, they post them on LinkedIn, they lure people to a job interview. During this process, you'll download a GitHub project and run it. Here is an example of one of those. It's embedded in a tool. It's phaser.js. I've seen it in error.js. This one's more blatant, as it's just the obfuscated JavaScript. That's the thing this entire file is. You come back to where the phaser.js is actually being called. It's all wrapped in an eval within another one of the JavaScripts. They're hiding JavaScript, this JavaScript elsewhere through API calls and hiding it in, like it looks like it's downloading a cookie, and then it breaks apart that cookie. Inside that cookie is obfuscated JavaScript. That's base64, and then they piece it back together. It's becoming more and more difficult to detect, even from a glance over the code. You know, as you get these projects, how many people are reading through every line of code before they run it because you're in the middle of the technical interview, and somebody on the other side is telling you to run it to prove that you fixed whatever the minor problem was that they wanted you to fix. Hands up. How many people are reading every line of code through a job interview? Okay, there was no hands. So this is a personal thing for me because it really bothers me that they're taking advantage of a workforce that is actively looking for jobs. They are specifically targeting Web3 developers because they're trying to steal crypto. But they do more than just steal crypto. They steal everything from the computer. It siphons, they pull the data off. If you have a resume on your computer, they love that because they're going to start applying on jobs as you. And if you have pictures and things like that, they love to make deep fakes of you. So just be careful out there. So North Korean threat actors are leveraging also Russian IT infrastructure to facilitate this crime, and that's kind of what our blog is about. But they're using Obfuscator, the JavaScript Obfuscator, the open source one, to make that. So that was, we've been ignoring it. 2022, we said this is a problem. We kept going. It's become bigger of a problem. So we're now, you're stealing your crypto to finance nation state activities. Russia or North Korea loves to steal money to further their nuclear weapons development. So there you go. That's who's behind, and this is who to fund those nuclear weapons. They're using JavaScript obfuscator. PyRDP. Has anybody ever used this? So PyRDP is an open source man-in-the-middle tool developed by GoSecure that allows red teamers and researchers to analyze and interact with RDP sessions in real time. So it can intercept RDP traffic, capture credentials, hijack sessions, monitor clipboard and file system activities, and then record session data for analysis. It acts as a proxy between the target and the legitimate RDP server. And PyRDP logs critical information like usernames and passwords while built with ethical and built for ethical use in pen testing. This also illustrates how similar tools can be leveraged by threat actors. You can imagine here. So this is a blog that hypothesized. It's called Rogue RDP. It's by Black Hilt. That the threat of a poorly secured RDP to show how easily attackers can gain access when organizations neglect to implement basic RDP hygiene. By using tools like Shodan and Mass-Scan, attackers can locate RDP servers, exploit through brute force, things like that. So this is a really good blog. So what happened here is they hypothesized this attack where they send a fake RDP config file that points to their server that then points to the actual RDP server. And you would log in thinking that you just got something to, the person who phished you had a really good thing to tell you to go ahead and you need to use this RDP config file. And then they would siphon all your data. So the really neat thing is PyRDP not only will, it'll attach remote drives based off the config file and then suck down all the file system from your computer as you attach to it. So here, this espionage campaign we uncovered, Microsoft kind of uncovered this. We put pieces of it together. So that's our name for APT29. It's a cyber espionage, APT29, who doesn't know about them? The group was using more or less this exact same described attack, except for the one difference is they were launching a remote application on their own RDP server after it went through PyRDP. So what you would do is you would click on this thing it's one of the examples was AWS configuration test. And you click on it and it would open up a window on their control box that would have you interact with and say that you're doing what exactly was said in the email. What ended up happening is while you were doing that, they were stealing data from your machine. And this targeted, of course, NGOs and large government organizations. This is an example of a highly sophisticated nation state threat actor group utilizing an open source red teaming tool. This is one of the newer slides, or one of the newer blogs from Trend as well. It's called Crazy. I don't remember. Zamicide is an offensive security tool designed to exploit misconfigured instances of Zamid, a widely used open source help desk ticketing system. It leveraged Zamid API to extract sensitive information such as tickets, attachments, and internal communications, which may be used for other things as well. This tool shows the importance of securing lesser scrutinized business applications as well. So that's what this tool is for, is to help you gauge that risk, show you the vulnerability, show you that it existed. Does anybody know the term BYOVD? It's a bring your own vulnerable driver. Just so if that ever comes up again. So Crazy Hunter was a campaign that was a Chinese threat actor group targeting Taiwanese critical sectors. Crazy Hunter initially gained access through sophisticated, it was a malicious RTF document exploiting a Microsoft Office vulnerability. Once inside, they deployed a custom loader and then C2 and all that fun stuff. One of the things from this blog from us was really interesting was 80% of their toolkit was open source. So this is one of the largest numbers of how many tools that we're seeing people utilize, was upwards to 80% of what they're using is just purely straight open source tools. You know, and even APT 41 was using GC2 to attack actors as well. So we have now North Korea, we have Russia, and we have China. The three major ones that we're all supposed to be worried about are using open source tooling to attack us. But you know, it doesn't get better. So here is PyP packages that were targeting. So malicious PyP using Wasp Stealer. So Wasp Stealer is an info stealer, and somebody had gotten it into PyP packages just to siphon information. Then we also have, so this is a picture, an example of a variant called of Wasp Stealer called Satan Stealer. So Wasp Stealer is an open source stealer. Satan Stealer was a fork or a variant of Wasp Stealer. The only difference was this Satan Stealer would actually send the things, everything it was stealing back to another C2 as well. Not only to the configured one, but the actors one as well. So this comes back to now we have supply chain attacks where criminals are using known platforms, changing them slightly, making them look better, and then going forward and trying to lure people into using them. You can actually see here just a little bit of just the straight code copies. We can look into VirusTotal and see how many different variants we were able to see by looking into the actual strings of the file content. You can see that it's a WP password and things like that, the strings from the Wasp Stealer that people have compiled and changed. So mutants are a thing we actually have to worry about. Do you really trust the code that somebody wrote in their spare time and that wasn't released or maintained by any companies, really? There's nothing wrong with open source tooling, and there's nothing wrong with people making it. The problem is we just have a information overload. However, how much time should we be going through all of this, and whose job is it to look through all this? Um, who is it to go? Whose job is it to go and look through all these packages, even from a red teaming or a pen test? Do you ask your consultants, have they done code reviews of everything they're about to deploy? And that's the real question. And that seems like a lot of work, and nobody really wants to do that because they could be using known vulnerable packages. Um, so I don't know if that's a mutant or it's Deadpool. Ron, you can let me know. Um, so we're going to look through a little case study of something we found while we were doing some of this work. During our research, we came up with some categories to start looking at. I'll mention those in a little bit to see if there was any mentions in underground forums and things like that, to see if we could come up with some ideas of how to better triage and evaluate these. So we came across this project called HTML Smuggler. Who in here is familiar with GitHub, right? Most everyone is. Does anybody ever pay attention to how many stars a project has? Or forks or things like that? So the way I looked at it was the number of stars, it's like a star map, guides you to where you should be looking and what it is I'm looking at. Turns out somebody else had already thought of this. It's a website called starchart.cc. You can actually look up over time the number of stars a project has had. What's interesting is that in HTML Smuggler's case, the project grew in late August and early September, but why? Why did that? It went from hardly any stars to a lot of stars. Well, around this time, there was actually an article published, um, and it's actually an article from a security company, where HTML Smuggler is a tool designed to support red team operations by leveraging techniques called HTML smuggling. I'm not going to get into what HTML smuggling is. Red teamers can use tools like this to simulate sophisticated attacks. What makes it particularly effective is the malicious code that isn't instead it's not transmitted over the full network. It's built up in the browser. So to compare, so you saw a very big spike here comparative to another project that just grew slowly over time. You can see that maybe we should have paid attention to HTML Smuggler when there was that initial talk, that initial spike, and then start looking into it because of that. So what I'm about ready to propose is that instead of being anti-red team, that we actually collaborate with the red team. They're trying to help us defenders with tools by releasing them because they're there. We should be paying attention to them. So I know that's really hard to see, so I'll break it out into little chunks. But this is more of what we've mentioned, everything up to this point in time is us being reactive. So let's take a little more of a proactive approach. We can also use AI to help automate some of this and provide intelligence with, a little bit here and there and try to figure out how we can get down and dwindle down these number of projects. So we have to define our categories. Then we search for those keywords. And if there was a result, then for every project, we do exclusion filters. We look at the star and fork popularity, and then we search for the underground mentions. This was an early diagram. Exclusion filters come later because exclusion filters is something I've done through AI. And if you do it beforehand, it gets kind of expensive, asking all those questions with the prompts. Then we decide whether there's a detection internally to trends. If not, then we go try to make a detection, and then we just loop that back through for everything. So again, back to the over 28,000s, how do we tackle that? So one of the things I said, we define our categories. So we look at these categories. We'll just take the MITRE attack techniques, have that as the category name. The ones that are bolded are our initial POC ones that we tried this with. But this is our final categories that we came up with based off of that we were going to look into. There's other categories that we just, from a PC or a network stance, you cannot detect it. Like phishing, or not phishing, social engineering. I can't detect that. So if you want to look at that. So yeah, the ones that we focused on initially were phishing kits, post-exploitation frameworks, uh, AV evasion, and there was another one. It's slipping my mind. It'll come up later. So to make these lists of things that we want to look at, there's a lot of tools. There's a lot of projects that are out there that list well-known red teaming tools. So we could go through all those and do this again, but the problem with that is we should have already had a detection for it. I want to be more proactive and find the new one. But this is a really good resource. I don't know if anybody looks around with it, but there's a well-maintained list of every C2, whether it's cost, if it's free, who actually evaluated it from this side, and just kind of what it's written in, and just kind of ranks them. So I mentioned the exclusion filters. This is where we used AI. So what we ended up doing is we use AI in this case. So I take the README from the projects after I define those categories and my search terms. The search terms I'm not going to show you. That's my secret sauce that we came up with. But you can come up with your own. It's actually not that hard. It just took a lot of fine tuning to make sure we're seeing the projects we wanted to see. So as an example for phishing kits, what are the terms that you use to search for phishing kits inside of GitHub? Now, the problem with this is the term phishing kit can find the phishing kits, but also will find the tools to help you find phishing kits. So one is nefarious, one is a helpful tool. So we can look at each project and read its README, or I can dispatch AI on this. So that's what we do. We pull in the README, put it into AI, have a bunch of prompts that then ask, and then finally we come and ask to a yes or no question. Can this be used for malicious purposes? And they, yes or no. So then we would store that result. As I mentioned, you can use Star Chart Sheets CC, or you can just, we found out that that is actually just using GitHub's API, and you cobble some pieces together and you can make your own star charts. We were able to do that and by redoing their code. And after some coding changes, what we were able to do is pull it from the GitHub API. To gauge if cybercriminals are chatting about this, we look at multiple sources. We look at X or Twitter, and also cybercriminal forums. How you get this data is kind of up to you. Some have in-house tooling to look for and monitor their own cybercriminal forum chats, and also their services you can purchase and use their APIs. One thing we found was if you do plan to do this, you shouldn't search for the word phishing kit like as the project name, because there's one out there that's like phishing -kit. That terminology is phishing kit. Criminals are talking about phishing kits all the time, just not that one specifically. So what we ended up doing was you search the owner and then the repo with a slash. That way then you can determine if they're talking about that project itself. Again, we may be missing things, but it's better than where we were trying to just play whack-a-mole. So yeah, so we ended up building our own in-house tool, and this was just a proof of concept to see if this worked. We called it GitHub Hunter. Then you can also deploy this with GitLab, Bitbucket, and other whatever the Chinese GitHub is. I don't remember its name. Um, you can, of course, use this for other sites. So our first categories we investigated were post-exploitation frameworks, credentialed access, AV evasion, and phishing kits. We started out with over 1,000 projects just looking at after we did our searches and just the search. They have met the criteria that we wanted to defend against. After we looked at the stars and forks and underground chatter, we dwindled that over 1,000 down to 72 projects. Um, what was interesting later on in the project, we came up with this idea that we would create automatic reports as well. So there's this GitHub, or not Chat GPT tool called Ask the Code. And you can actually literally just feed it a GitHub link and then ask a bunch of questions about the code itself. Um, it's designed to help developers understand and navigate complex code bases by answering natural language questions about the code. So we could ask a bunch of questions and we came up with a lot of prompts that then would turn around and make us a threat intelligence report about that project. And then we can actually hand that over to a real analyst to determine what kind of actions that they need to be taking to help defend against this project. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. In the future, the idea would be you could use agentic AI to monitor and flag GitHub projects automatically, dispatch the AI agents to go off and do some things and come back. Once a project is triggered, the AI could actually detail static and behavioral analysis of the code now. That's how much we've come in the 2 years since I've started this project, where that was just a dream that you could come up with it. But today, you can actually do it a little bit better. Of course, it will cost a lot, but that's why you have to filter down to those 72 projects. It makes way more sense to do it on that over 1,000. So over time, feedback from the analyst. So then you could have it in a feedback loop, and the AI would actually just get better at doing this, or worse. But yeah, that's AI for you. It could create a scalable and continuous learning threat and evaluation system. Magica. Has anybody ever played with Magica by Google? So Magica is actually an AI-powered tool from Google. It helps improve the file type identification. One problem we had while doing this is GitHub's file identification is kind of not really good. So it'll tell you that there's this type of code in there, or these type of files in there, and that it's not accurate. So you can actually run it through Magica, and it does a way better job of identifying what types of files are in each project. So it's lightweight. It was built on deep learning models with billions and billions of file types. So it's really good if you need to quickly identify types of projects. Go ahead and look at that and use that. So what does anybody know where this is from? It's from the Watchmen. Yeah. So the original term is actually in Latin. But it came from a term about who guards the guardians. So earlier I mentioned this idea about who watches the watchman, or I mentioned the idea about red teamers and who is making sure that they're doing the things. So then I came up with this idea about who red teams the red team. Maybe a new phrase, probably not, but based off the examples I showed, especially when it comes to the supply chain that people are working into, it's probably nation state actors. So we need to work together and ensure that our in-house teams, consultants, and are using legitimate software, always do your best to make sure that you don't be cheap and use the cracked version of Cobalt Strike. It's backdoored, so don't do that. Don't use to your best of knowledge. Don't use what's known as dual hooked software, which is the Wasp Stealer example I gave you. It's dual, sending the C2 communication to two different places. Uh, these are the same questions we should be asking all of our software that comes in. Of course, we should be doing that. We can't just let the red team come in and have no defenses. Um, we don't want to expose new risks just because we're trying to identify risks. But we need to remember that we're all on the same team. Red team, blue team, purple team. Everyone's goal is to defend the organization and stop the real attackers from finding their ways into the organizations and causing harm to the companies. So let's all work together and find these issues and stop the cyber criminals and nation states. And questions? Run, Adrian, run. You can walk, it's fine. I'm sure there's a lot of pressing questions. Oh, it's right there. Yeah.
Given that red team is a little bit harder to get into than other cybersecurity jobs, what advice would you give to people that are just now getting into cybersecurity as the skill set that you should build to get into red team?
So the best defender also thinks like an attacker. You have to identify those weaknesses that you can defend against. So you have to always be thinking about how people are going to, or how criminals can get in. The red team is just validating those concepts and also coming up with potentially new ways of doing it and immediately testing things. A lot of red teaming is validation, not hypothesizing.
Is it really harder? They hired me to do red teaming.
It's perceived to be, but you really have to be good at truly thinking like the adversary. And that's my best advice, though, is also to be a good red teamer. You also have to defend. You have to think about how somebody's going to defend against this. That way, you could potentially go around that defense. So you have to be good in both. You have to be good at both.
Yeah, agreed. Any other questions? All right.
Drinks
Another
are in the
round of
back.
applause, please, for Steven.